Hello everyone. I'd just like to say a big welcome to everyone for coming to what is our first public event from the RemainerNow campaign. Delighted to be here. So for those of you who don't know, the RemainerNow campaign is a grassroots group that has built a community in order to amplify the voices of those who perhaps didn't vote in 2016 for whatever reason, or in most cases voted leave, but have now changed their minds over the last 3 years. So first of all, I'm Andy. I founded this organisation or group sort of by accident, didn't really realise what would happen back in December 2017. So, how did the RemainerNow campaign start? Hands up, I'm not a RemainerNow myself. I voted Remain. And I'm going to, before I kind of talk about where I come from, if you'd indulge me for a second in a short story of my own. Like I said, I voted Remain. I was actually on holiday during the referendum, having postal voted. Votes came through, probably like many people, pretty distraught, seeing what was happening, didn't know what was going on. But returned from holiday that weekend and went into work on the Monday. Went for lunch with a couple of colleagues, and me and another guy were pretty distraught about the whole situation, saying we can't believe it, don't know what's going to happen, it's turmoil, it's chaos. And a colleague just goes, guys, I don't know how to tell you this, but I voted leave. And we were quite surprised, we weren't expecting it, and dug down a bit deeper and said, oh, why? And she said, do you know what, I was going to vote Remain, I heard the arguments, had spoken to you guys and everyone, definitely was going to vote Remain, and then I was in the pub the night before the vote with some of my friends, and we'd always been Labour voters, and none of us liked David Cameron, and they'd all said to me, do you know what, Remain's probably going to win anyway, don't do what Cameron wants, give him a kicking. So I voted leave. And she said, look guys, I know it was stupid, I shouldn't have done it, and I regret it already. So, although I didn't know it at the time, that was the first RemainerNow that I had met just 3 days after the referendum. So, fast forward kind of 18 months, like many, I'd been watching what was going on, getting more and more disillusioned and upset about what was happening in our country. A Twitter account that had been silent for a year and a half, 2 years, was reactivated, and got involved, as probably many people, following MEPs. I remember David Lammy was one of them in particular that really jumped out to me, and getting involved in the kind of Remain Twitter community gradually. Fast forward to the autumn of 2017, it's an utter shambles. You've got David Davis in front of the select committee being asked whether he's done impact assessments on the aerospace industry. No. The automotive industry. No. Agriculture. No. Do you know what? I was like, I am pretty damn angry about the neglect and aggregate, and I was like, I can't just sit by and watch this, I need to do something. And what I'd done by that point is I'd started, from Twitter and from my own experiences, I'd started to find quite a few of regretful leavers, talking about it. I'd been following them, I'd been reading the letters they'd written to their MPs, blogs they'd written, and I was like, wow, these are pretty powerful messages. The People's Vote campaign hadn't even been launched, it was launched in April the next year. And there was obviously people arguing that it should be a referendum, but it was very much a fringe thing. I was like, these voices are powerful. And every time I found one, I followed them. And then suddenly, I started seeing this hashtag emerge, which was RemainerNow. And unfortunately, I was really hoping the guy that started it was going to be here tonight, but he had a diary confusion, thought it was last night, so couldn't come. But I started seeing this, I was like, wow, this is interesting. So I started searching it and following it and thinking, yeah, these are powerful stories. Someone should do something to really bring out these and bring these together. So I've been following these people, and it was December the 15th, 2017, I was at home, and one of the ladies I've been following, only for a couple of days at that point, having seen her talk about a change of mind, I suddenly saw a couple of tweets from her. And it was in response to Martin Lewis, the money-saving expert. It kind of asked a general question, how are people feeling about leave about Brexit right now? Julie replies, this one says, I thought I knew what I was doing. I see now I didn't, and I'm mightily pissed off about it. I feel my decision was informed on lies and deception, and I don't like to be fooled. I feel humiliated and frustrated. A few minutes later, a lady called Anne replies, me too. Grr. Julie replies back, if more people feel like us, and I am certain that they are many, felt able to speak up too, the numbers would be pretty powerful. Well, thanks Julie for the last 21 months of my life. I did, and that was the trigger, okay? So I thought, and I was like, Julie, you're right. And so I picked up on the RemainerNow hashtag and made an account at RemainerNow, and the aim was to, and I just started sharing. I just started quote tweeting people's tweets I'd seen, or articles I'd read, or videos I'd watched. I remember seeing panorama programmes or Channel 4 news clips or what have you, and just started sharing them. And there was a couple of accounts on there that had kind of been screenshotting regretful leavers that gave me some leads, but they hadn't really been engaging. So what I did was I pick up Julie's tweet and go, here's Julie. She voted leave in 2016, but she now feels completely humiliated and ashamed. Thank you, Julie. It's pretty brave to speak up on this issue. Welcome, and thanks for doing this. And just did it like that. So that's how we started. And it was really to try, on the back of what Julie said there, try and build that community, to really try and combat the narrative that we see far too often, that no one's changed their minds, we voted for it, 17.4 million. I'm sure the guys that are going to speak later are going to talk about, how they feel when they see those numbers, and some of the being told that this is what they voted for feel. So that's what we started. So kind of what have we done over the last kind of 20 months really? So it started just with me, very quickly, a lady called Victoria, who's at the back hiding away, contacts me to say, I've got some political experience, I really wanted to do what you're doing, it's pretty, can I come on board and help you? So she did. So for a year or so, it was just two of us in our spare time, trying to amplify these voices. So we set up Facebook pages, we set up a website, and then now we've moved on to have Instagram and YouTube and everything like that. And we just engage with people. We find people out there and we do that engagement. We look at them, we maybe go back and look at their timelines, check they did actually vote leave, they're not Remainers pretending. Sounds a bit stalkery, but it's to ensure we have integrity. And we'll share them, or we'll hear media clips where the videos we were showing as you came in, people who have called into LBC or BBC or what have you, and talk about changing their minds. We'll share them, we'll grab clips off question time, everything like that, to basically show that there are people out there that change their minds, and add the personal touch and the personal stories to the polling, which, let's face it, has shown since August 2017 that there's a majority for Remain in this country, and a lot of people in this government particularly, and in the media, seem to just ignore that and don't rectify it. And that's against any Brexit, not actually a deliverable formal Brexit, that's against the vague idea. Put it against an actual Brexit, your numbers really increase as the majority. So look, that's what we do. We've also done, as well as sharing these things, we've started doing things offline. We've done 3 trips to Parliament, where we took RemainerNow groups, went to the House of Lords in April 2018, took a half dozen people there, chatted, and a few MPs, and Chuka actually came along to that. We then organised an event with some Labour MPs mainly in October and January. It's October last year and January of this year when we met, and people told their stories. So we've done that. Obviously, given what's going on, there's been an awful lot of rallies around the country. We've sent quite a few people. Daniel spoke at an event a week or so, Chris spoke at an event just yesterday. We're trying to do that to get people out there, but we want to do a lot more. And maybe at the Q&A, I don't want to talk about too much more about what we could do going forward. Maybe we'll leave that because I want other people to speak and have plenty of time. But I think I personally, having engaged with so many of these people, the bravery to say on such a divisive issue, to hold their hands up, potentially take a vitriol from people saying, I made a mistake, I've changed my mind, and actually be public about it, because I think as well as these great public RemainerNow guys, I'm sure there's so many silent people that we're trying to encourage them to come out. So, thank you for listening to me. I just really wanted to give that flavour of kind of where we've come from and what we do. I'm delighted now to hand over to Caroline, who can give her perspective on things going on at the moment.
It's really good to be here and to meet some of you, and I'm really sorry that I will have to dash off before I've heard all the RemainerNow speakers, but I have to go and do speed dating with the Lib Dem MEPs at our conference. So make of that what you will. So I joined the Liberal Democrats the day after the referendum, 24th of June 2016. I'd had a bit of a sleepless night, so it wasn't really that I woke up feeling devastated. I don't think I really went to sleep. And I live in Totnes in South Devon, which is a little bubble of Remain in a sea of Leave. And so I ran a business in Totnes at the time, and I think I was quite, what's the word? I was sort of, sorry, really tired. No, I think I didn't realise what was going on out there, because I had people coming into my business all day, every day, who all voted Remain, and we were all talking about the referendum, and obviously we were all going to vote Remain, and it was all going to be okay, and I was just unaware of what was going on, and I think a lot of people were in that situation, especially people in Westminster, who were living in the Westminster bubble. So it was a massive shock, and my whole town, it felt like my whole town was in mourning the day after, and I had invited all my neighbours in the street to a victory party, and luckily I put on the invitation at the bottom, and if the worst happens, please come anyway, and we'll drown our sorrows together. And at 7 o'clock that evening, my doorbell started to go, and one by one, my neighbours came in, just looking, it was like a wake. It looked like everybody had been to a funeral, and it was awful. And the wine started to flow, and we had French cheese. I'd gone to the supermarket, I bought lots of European food, and we got really pissed. And by the end of the evening, we did all feel much better, and that was like the first feeling of, a community, and we're in this together, and this is truly awful, but somehow, if we stick together, somehow or other, we're going to come out the other side, and it's going to be okay. But we all it was like clinging to each other. It was really quite remarkable. So anyway, fast forward 3 years, and I was elected as a Lib Dem MEP to Brussels, which was quite amazing, and not really what I had expected when I joined the party. But I have to say, it is definitely going to be the greatest privilege of my life, and hopefully it will last a long time. But I don't know how many of you are local, how many of you voted Lib Dem, but obviously thanks to all of the amazing support we had in the Southwest, that Martin, who's just arrived at the back, and me, and Molly, all got re-elected. And I think it's really great to be able to say that there were 3, it'd be brilliant to say there were 4 or 5 Remain MPs elected in the Southwest, but every time people say to me, well, the Leave vote was stronger in the Southwest, I say, yes, but there were 3 Remain MEPs and 3 Leave MEPs returned to Brussels, and our voices were heard. So the Remain vote was stronger, yes. So what have I been doing as an MEP since being elected? Well, probably the thing that's most relevant to this meeting is in our parliamentary break in August, I did a massive tour of the Southwest, which involved a lot of miles and a lot of country lanes and a lot of cream teas. And meeting business people and farmers and all sorts of people, Cornwall Council, and we did lots of visits and heard from people about what the real impact of leaving, particularly with no deal, is going to be. And one of the hardest things as a politician is that there are so few people who are prepared, particularly people in business, who are prepared to go public about what it's actually going to mean. Because they all say, well, I can't say this publicly because I'm going to lose my customers, or I'll lose my suppliers, or my customers will just go straight to my competitor in Germany who does the same thing, and then they don't need to worry about it anymore. And that's really, really difficult, because we need people to back us up and say, what they're saying is not Project Fear. This is actually the truth. This is reality, and this is what's going to happen. So that's quite frustrating. And what Andy said about, the bravery of you people coming out and saying you feel that you got it wrong. I wouldn't say you got it wrong, but that you've changed your mind. What kind of world are we living in where people are actually frightened to admit that? And it was most obvious to me when I went to Newquay to talk to the fishing industry, which as a Lib Dem is quite a hard thing to do, because they're not known for being particularly friendly towards the Lib Dems. And we had a meeting with a woman whose family has been involved in fishing for generations, and she owns trawlers, she's embedded in that fishing community. And she would not meet me on the record, and she would not have a photograph taken, and she would not let me say anything about her meeting, because she's so not scared, but the vitriol she gets is just so strong and so nasty that she has stopped saying anything about Brexit at all. And she voted Remain, and her family voted Remain. And she says she's probably not the only person in the fishing community who did vote Remain. And she knows how devastating it's going to be to Newlyn if, for example, we have delays at the border because so much of their fish is exported to Europe. But she won't say it publicly. So then you get, then I put something on social media about how I've had these meetings and how people know that there's going to be a detrimental impact on the fishing industry if we go through a no-deal Brexit. And I get completely hammered by thousands of Brexiteers who come on my Twitter feed and just say, you don't know what you're talking about, and So that side of it is very frustrating. One thing we've been doing in the European Parliament is we sit in Renew Europe, which is the group of Liberal MEPs, some more liberal than others, but we represent, I think, 22 countries, and there are 106 of us in that group, and the French are the biggest delegation in the group. So we've been trying quite hard to make friends with the French and be nice to the French and encourage them to talk to Macron, so that if anybody ever gets to the stage where they go to Europe and ask for an extension, that Macron will be on side and will say yes. So, I mean, that's one of the sort of practical things we're doing in Europe. I notice our French friend is laughing. We hope he'll be on board. And then this morning, obviously, well, some of you may know, I summed up the motion at our conference. So we have just passed a motion to say that if the Liberal Democrats are elected into a majority government, we'll revoke Article 50. And we're going to get a lot of pushback from people who say that that's undemocratic, and we're ignoring the will of the 17.4 million people who voted. And I will just say this, because it's not a party political event, but I will just say this about our policy. We think everyone's had enough. We think people who voted Remain have had enough. We think people who voted Leave have had enough. We think an awful lot of people would vote the other way if they got the chance. We don't believe in the will of the people. We don't believe that still holds 3 years after the referendum, and we want to stop it. And we don't think we're going to have time for a people's vote. We would prefer to have a people's vote. We can see that democratically people would say that that is fairer. But actually the way the momentum is going now is it's looking like it's going to be a general election. And if there's a general election, then we need people to know that that is what we would do, because we would not go into government and then try and renegotiate a different Brexit deal that we would then bring home and have to campaign against, because we don't want a deal, because we want the deal we've got. So logically, it's the only thing we can do. And I'm really proud of that. I think we need clarity. I think we need, we need to be brave. I think we need to keep saying that any kind of Brexit is worse than the deal we've got with the European Union. And I'm so proud to be sitting there and being part of it, and it really is inspirational. And Molly's been there for years. She would agree that just watching all these people from all these different political ideologies and nations sort of coming together and trying to reach compromise on policies, on everything, from environment to human rights to workers' rights. It's really amazing. It's so different to Westminster, and we feel like we really have a voice there, because we're not backbenchers. There isn't a government and an opposition. We're all in it together, and we really, really, really need to stay. And so I think the voices of Julian and Andy and I knew we began with D, sorry, and Chris. They're so powerful, and I want us to hopefully. I want to help you amplify those voices. I'm going to do everything I can to keep amplifying that on my social media. And I would really like to invite you all to Brussels to come to our Parliament. And hopefully we could do something before October the 31st. I want you to come, and we'll welcome you. And we're not leaving. No, we're not leaving. And Molly will be there, and we'll all be there together, and we'll give you a warm welcome, and because that's where you need to be, and to show why we're doing this. So thank you very much.
I'm also very pleased to be here I hope there's a lot of RemainerNow types here. I think there are also quite a lot of Lib Dems, quite a lot of people wearing yellow, which is quite unusual if you're not a Lib Dem, I think. And Greens, yeah. I wanted to be here so much I've actually come by train on a Sunday, so it wasn't easy, but I'm here. I wanted to show my support, because I think what RemainerNow do is one of the most important things that's happening at the moment. both the previous speakers have spoken about courage, and I think that's, to me, what RemainerNow is all about. Because it's really easy, isn't it, to say you were right all along. That's what I mostly do. It's really easy to do. You know, I could see that Brexit was going to be a disaster. I argued for Remain, I campaigned for Remain, I haven't changed my mind. That's a kind of easy thing intellectually to say. And it's actually really easy to say, we won, you lost, shut up, as well. But what's really hard to say is I thought one thing, and I changed my mind about it. And that's what RemainerNow is all about. And to me, that's a really powerful, brave, important part of the discussion here. Because as we get into these two tribes, who is it that's moving from tribe to tribe? It's the people who are changing their minds and have the courage to say they're changing their minds. And my own view is at referendum time there were 30% completely convinced about Remain, 30% completely convinced about Remain, and there were 30% or something like this who were just in the middle. And those people are coming backwards and forwards. And those people get almost entirely left out of the discussion. And that's again why I think RemainerNow is really important, because they're bringing that back into the discussion, and that helps to ease the conflict between Leave and Remain. We're not a country of Leave and Remain. We're a country of lots and lots of people who have different views, complex and different views. And that binary division is one of the things that's undermining society and really damaging our democracy. So, I think RemainerNow is great because I think people who are in RemainerNow have the courage to say they've changed their minds. I also think they're the people who are actually being really responsible. Most people in this debate are not being very responsible. They're not really considering what's best for the country and thinking about the issues that really affect the country. And to be honest, a lot of politicians are playing this with one eye on party political advantage and one eye on what's best for the country. And that's also why I think RemainerNow is really good, because it's people who have the responsibility to take on their citizenship and say, I made a mistake and I'm going to do something because this is damaging the country. What I did is damaging the country. It's my responsibility to do something about it. So good on you. It's also about feelings. If you listen to some of those recordings that were going on as you came in, it's actually very often about how people feel. Like I think you said in the case, that started you off, Andy, that was, I can't remember the woman's name, Julie, yeah. But she was saying how she felt really bad about what was happening. And the example that really hit home for me was Bill, who is on this video of yours. And because he's from the southwest, and he had one of those really beautiful soft Devon accents, and he was on LBC, crying on LBC about the fact that he'd damaged his country. And it was just so moving to me to hear that. And he was saying, how bad he felt because he destroyed his own country. And James O'Brien rightly said to him, it's not your fault, mate, as James O'Brien would say. It's not your fault, mate, because you were lied to. It's the liars that we're angry with. We're not angry with you. We're not angry with people that didn't think, that leading politicians would tell lies. We're angry with the politicians that told lies. And so, and I think it's really important to note, actually, that what happened in the referendum was very much about what happened at the last minute, just as Julie said. A lot of people had their minds made up, but a lot of people literally went to the pub the night before and, made their mind up suddenly then. And that surge right at the end, a lot of that was a consequence of lying adverts coming in from Canada on Facebook. And they came in deliberately. Most of the money spent was spent then, and they were sent deliberately so that they came in after the polls. So a lot of people went to vote thinking Remain was home and dry and casting their vote for Leave as some sort of gesture. And those people, I think a lot of those people were actually RemainerNows. They didn't even mean it to happen, and immediately was seized on by people who could exploit it for their own reasons. So that's why I think RemainerNow is doing a really important job for our democracy and a really important job to help people who know they made the wrong decision and want to be able to do something about it. Now, one of the things I was asked to cover is what we're actually doing from the European angle. As Caroline said, we had a very positive cross-party working going before the election. We had a group of cross-party MEPs who worked together to do what we could to help our country in this situation. And we've revived that since the election, and we're just getting that going in terms of the sorts of things we can do to support our country, to support really a sort of pseudo-diplomatic function, I would say. Because if you think about how things are going, there's very poor relations between our country and other heads of state across Europe now. We've had the Foreign Secretary standing up at Tory party conference comparing the EU to the USSR. You can imagine how that goes down in Poland and Estonia. As diplomatic relations break down, we feel that we have this function, especially working together across parties. It can be very powerful, reaching out to the council, reaching out to the heads of state and saying, actually cut us a bit of slack here. We're in trouble. We're in political trouble. We're in democratic trouble. We need a bit of space. I have to say this worked spectacularly badly at the last council meeting where Macron was kind of like, I don't really care, you can have a very short extension there. But hopefully this time that's going to change, and as Caroline said, that's something we try to do, working together, to try and reach out to some of the powerful players in the council so that when we get that extension, I'm actually quite hopeful, the noises are quite positive, they might decide to actually give us quite a lengthy extension this time. And this week, Caroline and I are going on the long trek to Strasbourg, and one of the things we're going to be debating is our latest Brexit resolution. And each time we take the next step on Brexit, the Parliament leads. But the Parliament leads sort of from behind in a strange way. This is a typical European thing, where basically if we get something in our resolution, then it's probably been squared away by the council first. And this time I put forward a resolution for the Greens to negotiate that said that avoiding no deal should itself be a reason to have an extension. So we already had, we probably heard, for democratic reasons, so a people's vote or a general election. But this time the suggestion will be included, I hope, in the Parliament's resolution, and I hope the council will listen to this, to say that avoiding no deal is itself a reason why the council should give a resolution, and hopefully that will again just allow us some more breathing space to sort things out at this side. Now, so I've said all the polite stuff here at the Liberal Democrat conference, and I'm now going to say why I don't agree with you. No, so one of the things I think is tremendously important here is that we do respect people who voted leave. I never say that I respect or honour the referendum result, because it was bought with lies, crookery and foreign money, right? So I absolutely do not respect the referendum result, and I don't think there's a mandate for Brexit. But I absolutely respect the people that voted leave, and I know why they voted leave, because they were absolutely desperate. Austerity had reduced them to their knees, and they wanted something to change. They saw David Cameron there, as you said, and they thought, here's something we can throw at him. So I think it's really important that we do respect them. And I think we have to get out of this complete Brexit mess in a way that everybody in the country can accept. So we are completely with you over stopping Brexit, and we're completely with you in adopting a strong stop Brexit position at the general election. But we will not be calling for immediate revoke. And obviously we'll be debating this at our conference as well, and we have debated it a lot. But my own sense is we need that lengthy extension, because we need to have a national debate. We need to have a proper national debate without lies, without aggression, without this false binary division. And the main focus of that debate should be what's the best future for our country. And when we debate in that way, we agree about most things. Most people think we should swiftly move to 100% renewable energy. Most people think we should have public ownership of the railways. Most people think we should have higher rates of taxes on the wealthy. And all of these things would help to deal with the issues that gave rise to Brexit. So I think we need to very much focus on what we agree on and what we don't agree on. And I'd like to see a 2-year extension, a citizens' assembly process. And the other reason I want a long extension is I'm quite clear that we do not have the protections we need, the legal protections of our electoral system, to allow us to have either a people's vote or a general election in a way that will be considered free and fair by international standards. And that's a horrible thing to have to say. But I'm clear that that's the case, and so we're going to have those protections put in place before we can be sure that we can have, a people's vote that would correctly reflect where people are at. So, so yes, it's great to be here. Thank you very much, RemainerNow. I very much look forward to hearing your testimonies later on, and thanks for having me at the Lib Dem conference, even though I disagreed with you a little bit.
Daniel voted leave, but he's changed his mind, and he's here to tell you why he's a Remainer now.
Well, thank you everyone, especially for coming. Thank you to Noddy, as I'm a Green member, so it's always nice to see Green here. Thank you to Caroline for what you were saying earlier. Thank you for coming. Don't worry, it's fine, it's not the end of the world yet. We haven't left, so don't worry. So I'll tell you my story. Actually, first of all, I need to say a thank you to a couple of people. Oh, don't get upset. Andy, for one, for starting RemainerNow. Our voices at the moment are so important in this debate, especially where we're potentially heading for October the 31st. If he hadn't started the campaign from scratch by himself, then had Victoria get involved, and now we've had JB get involved, who does a lot of our checks to make sure people are actually real and not fake people like we've had previously. We've got Alex now involved as well. If it wasn't for these guys, we wouldn't be here where we are today. We wouldn't be speaking to you in public, we wouldn't be going to rallies across the country telling people that there are those who voted to leave that have changed their minds. So I must give a huge thank you to all you guys for what you do in the background for us, and keep up the good work, because we're going to get there. So, my story. Right, sorry, I'm going to have to take you back to 2016 again. What a shit show that was. So yeah, I voted to leave in 2016, as someone said to me again, you sound like you say that, but you're wearing a badge of honour. So I don't wear it with a badge of honour, trust me, I really don't, not anymore. So I was persuaded actually on the idea of being an independent country, like America, Australia and India. And it was quite a good concept to use. Yeah, we could be independent, we can do what we want, we can trade who we want, we can have all these amazing trade deals, 21 so far. And yeah, we're doing well. Not. And so from that I voted to leave. Even on the day of the referendum, I went to the polling station and I was actually looking at my ballot paper and going, how do I vote? Do I vote leave? Do I vote remain? And it was that argument of being an independent country that I used. Do you know what? Let's do it. It'll be fine. How wrong I was. So yeah, so back in October last year, I changed my mind, and I put something out on Twitter actually, and I said that I changed my mind. I've looked at what on earth is going on with Theresa May, with what we've had with the withdrawal agreement and the political declaration. I thought it's just completely, utterly ridiculous. It's not what actually Leave voters wanted. They wanted to leave the European Union. They didn't want to have these kind of attachments still to them, and that was the premises for a lot of people why they voted to leave. But I can't speak for them. And so from that, I looked at where we were heading as a country, how Parliament was, what they were doing, and I thought, I can't be involved in this campaign. I see, especially like Cambridge Analytica, all the lies and the betrayal, well, maybe not betrayal, that's the wrong word to use, as I've been told today, especially by Tim Farron. From that, it is more of a case of that I've looked at the complete and utter disaster of Brexit. I've looked at where we're heading. The main issues are not being debated like Molly has stated previously. And so, yeah, that's where my kind of change of mind basically happened back in October last year. And so Andy then contacted me, we had a bit of a chat, checked out that I was real, and I was. And yeah, so, and then since then, a lot's happened. I've had an op-ed in the an op-ed article in the Metro. That was back in January, titled "I voted to leave, but to protect my LGBT rights, I want a people's vote." And that gained quite a lot of traction. That was really fun. And so yeah, so PV helped me with that. That got published, especially now with a populist Prime Minister who's being used like a muppet by Dominic Cummings. So yeah, I'm going to keep fighting for my LGBT rights so we can stay with the European Union. But it's not just to protect my rights, but it's also the 3 million EU citizens that live in the UK, and also the UK citizens living across Europe as well. Those are so important voices, because they are literally, their lives are being torn apart, and yeah, it's horrible.
It's all right, it is very emotional. It's okay, we all feel that way.
Yeah, so, oh. Oh dear. I had a few drinks, and this doesn't help either. Last night, by the way, not now, by the way. God, can you imagine that? Ooh, that'd be fun. So yeah, so I've done a lot for the campaign. Actually, a lot of us have done a lot actually. I've been on. So Chris will hear from later. He does our podcast for RemainerNow. So I've been on that a couple of times, which is always fun. I was at a rally last Saturday in Ely, and so I'm going to actually speak to something personally. You may have seen a video on our Twitter feed from the rally that I was at in Ely last Saturday, and it was actually, I had a script, I was going to use it, but I didn't use, and I actually mentioned that I'm HIV positive, and I'm quite worried that half of my medication comes from the EU. So it's isthmus, and that reduces my viral load, so it can basically keep me alive. That's the one thing. It's not like I don't have diabetes or epilepsy where they're in liquid form and they have to be transported in cold storage. So if they're left out for over 72 hours, they have to be destroyed. Mine's tablet form, that's fine. But I get mine every 6 months. What if there's delays? Are they stockpiled? No idea. Will they be? No idea. So that's a huge concern for me right now. And this is, I think, the other issue as well, that it's not just about food shortages, but it's also about medicine shortages as well. If they're not stockpiled, I will end up being dead in 10 years. That's the reality that we're now facing, which I hadn't even realised. So I was diagnosed last year, and I didn't even think of this at the time. So it's quite powerful and shocking all at the same time. But yeah, so I may not agree with Molly on some of her sentiments she said, because there have been rumours going around. So this is my strategy thinking now. In essence of, how long have we got? A minute, okay. I'll shut up then. So quickly, I don't agree with the revoke. It's a little bit dangerous. This is my personal view, not a Green Party member, by the way. But 2-year extension, there are rumours going around like that, and I think that could be quite damaging to us as well. So there's a lot that's going to be happening over the next probably 6 months, because we're still going to be in it, full stop. But yeah, there's going to be a lot of things happening. So thank you for listening, and I pass you over to Chuka.
Thank you so much for that. I thought that was an incredibly powerful one. Thank you for just being so candid and straight up about your experience. And I just want to add my voice to the thanks to all of you guys who set the campaign up. And I remember, I think right at the start, coming to do an event in Parliament. And I think this is really important that we've got a cross-party panel as well, because I think the strength of the anti-Brexit movement is born of the fact that we've elevated this cause beyond party political interest. And certainly for the Lib Dems, as you've seen different people within the Liberal tradition who sat in different other families come into the party, if that is one positive, I suppose, that's come of Brexit, is that forming those relationships has enabled us to go on a journey during this reconfiguration of British politics that has brought many of us to the Liberal Democrats. Now, I was asked specifically to just say something about what is going to happen in Parliament over these next few weeks. And of course, there is a question as to whether we are recalled or not. I have to say, I think it's probably on the low side of us going back to Parliament early. We're still there. I'm still there every day of the week doing my work. But I'd be quite surprised if we are recalled before the 14th of October. It's possible it could happen, but I think it's unlikely. And so the question is, well, what happens when we get back, if it is the 14th of October that we return? And we have a European Council on the 17th and the 18th. I think it is highly likely, based on the discussions that I've had with other member state governments, that we are going to be granted the extension that the Hillary Benn Act provides for. There was some worry or trepidation that maybe a fellow populist, hard right government would come to the aid of Boris Johnson and exercise a veto on the European Council, preventing us from getting that extension. The favourite candidate to assume that position was Viktor Orban, the leader in Hungary. But even insofar as he's concerned, I'm told that it's not expected that he will go and do something like that. So to all intents and purposes, I think that extension will be granted until the end of January. So the question is, well, what then happens after that point? If the extension is granted on the 17th or the 18th of October, I think it's quite probable that on Monday, the 21st of October, the leader of the opposition will table a vote of no confidence in the government. That is if the Prime Minister hasn't brought for the third time a motion to dissolve Parliament before the House of Commons.
And I think in that situation, it is highly likely that the vote to begin the countdown towards a general election will start. I think it is unlikely, if it is a vote of no confidence that is passed, that in the 2-week period that follows before Parliament is dissolved, I think it's unlikely that a government of national unity will form, because I simply cannot see Jeremy Corbyn agreeing to that unless he was to be the primary candidate to be the Prime Minister of that government, and there simply are not the numbers for a government under his premiership to form. So what that means is, the long and the short of it is that we are likely to end up in a general election either early December or maybe towards the middle of it. There is then the question, could we end up going all the way into the spring, which apparently was the preferred route for the Johnson government. I cannot see how we can continue as we are in the House of Commons with a government that has a majority of -43. I just don't see how we continue like this. We are not really considering any legislation at all at the moment, unless the government absolutely has to bring it forward, because it's worried that if there is any business, that we will take over the order paper from the backbenches and start passing things again, which we are able to do. So we've just had these kind of series of general debates that don't really mean much, and you just have a pedestrian debate about a particular policy, but you're not actually doing much. And that has been the character of parliamentary business over the last few months. Parliament really has broken down, and I do not believe we can carry on like this without there being a general election. Now, the question is, what happens if there's a general election? Well, really, that is completely in our hands, because I feel the role that we could play could be really potentially very decisive in any potential general election. And of course you have seen the new policy that conference has adopted today, which is up until the point of a general election we will pursue a people's vote, as we have done. We were the first to do so before even I was arguing for it. But if there is a general election, we have to continue to have a clear, consistent and unequivocal policy. And if there is a Liberal Democrat majority government, then that will be sufficient to provide us with a democratic mandate to revoke Article 50. Now obviously, if there isn't a Liberal Democrat majority government, we will of course still be seeking to pursue a people's vote. But the offer that we will be making to the electorate at the general election is to stop this national embarrassment and this chaos, so that we can actually focus on the real issues, many of which led people to vote to Brexit in the first place. I don't believe, if we were to go to the British people and say, look, we want to carry this on for another 2 years of uncertainty and not making a decision, that that's going to prove a particularly attractive proposition. People want us to move on and resolve this issue, either by just getting outcome what may, which is what's been offered by Boris Johnson, or stopping this thing altogether. And so long as you've got a democratic mandate to do that, then that is the key thing as far as I'm concerned. I'm just going to finish by saying something. I just want to say one thing in response to what Molly said, and another in respect to why I think this campaign is really important. Just one thing, and I'm not sure this is what Molly was seeking to say, but just to be clear, this party, of course, respects those who voted to leave the European Union, not least because we represent a great number of them in many of the constituencies that we already hold. And in fact, the newest constituency that we took, the by-election of Brecon and Radnorshire, actually had a majority vote to leave. So we're not pursuing our policy to necessarily disrespect anyone. We happen to think that our policies are in the best interest of the people that we're seeking to represent. And the people who voted in that Brecon and Radnorshire actually knew what our position was, which was to stop Brexit, but they also knew that that was emblematic of a set of values, and that we seek to do a lot more than stop Brexit, which is presumably why they voted for us in that by-election. The final thing is, I just want to say, is that I think if there's one lesson that we learned from the Britain Stronger in Europe campaign, which I played a role in, I think Molly was very active too, we were both in our parties and were very involved with it. if we look at this Europe issue as purely an argument to be made about fact, rational reason, data, why it's going to economically be awful, I think we're going to fail again to actually win the argument. Because I think we've got to emotionally connect with people on this argument too and speak to their hearts and really explain what this is really about. Now, I often do that by reference to my family because we are completely European. My sister, some of you who may have been at the event I was speaking at earlier, my sister lives in Denmark. I've got a Danish niece, nephew, I've got French, all of that. We should be talking about things like that. The story that we've just heard of how that actually will directly impact people, we should be telling those stories more. But there's undoubtedly a psychological barrier when you've made a decision and done something in one instance and then you choose to take a different course in another instance. And in many respects, I think we can talk to people who are going through that process and have that debate and that discussion that you should have in a democracy. But why this campaign in particular is so powerful is that the team here have so much authority in many respects to have that discussion and to make the argument as to why it's actually okay to take a different course, because you've been on the journey too. And this is where I think that this campaign really adds to the debate and enables us to win the argument, because you can tell the story in a way that I can't, because I always thought it would be a disaster to leave the European Union. But I think those who didn't always think that way, they've got an ability to move minds and to change views in a way that I can't. And so thank you so much for setting up the campaign, and it's incredible to see where it is now, given where you started it, and on a voluntary basis without any funding. So thank you very much for that, and thanks for having me here to speak about PCA today.
Thank you very much, Chuka. Greatly appreciated. I know you've got a busy schedule, so thank you very much for coming down. We're going to go on to our next speaker. Julian voted leave in 2016, but he almost instantly changed his mind, and he's going to tell you why he is a Remainer now.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and for one person here, bonjour. I'm delighted to be sitting up here, particularly with Caroline and Molly, both of whom I'm pleased to be able to tell you I voted for in the Euro elections.
I'm not Caroline anymore.
You're not Caroline anymore.
I've transformed.
I'm going to start by telling you a little bit about myself. I'm a 70-year-old grandfather, and for 40 years I ran a medium-sized manufacturing business. I've got a degree in art history and literature. I've been a magistrate for about 20 years. I retired recently. I'm a guide at the National Trust House, Kingston Lacey in Dorset, the most beautiful house. Do come and see us. And I've been chairman of our local parish council, and I set up and was the original chairman of the Association of Dorset School Governors. I joined the Liberal Party at the age of 16, that's 54 years ago, and this has been my first conference. That's got to be some sort of record, I think. However, I was also a founder member of the SDP. I was chairman of Wimborne Liberal Democrats, and I resigned when Nick Clegg went into coalition with that other lot, and I rejoined the party when Joe became our new leader. And I'm delighted to be back at home. So why do I tell you all of that? Well, there are two reasons. First of all, I want you to realise that I'm a reasonably intelligent-minded person. And secondly, I think you should be concerned, maybe you should be a little alarmed that I voted leave despite being a liberally minded, intelligent person. So let me explain why I took that decision and then what happened in the subsequent couple of years. 2016 was a very difficult year for me. I know that's a phrase that people use fairly glibly all the time, but it genuinely was. My business required greater investment, but at 66 years old, despite the government trying to make us all retire at about 80 nowadays, I decided that having had 40 years of running this business, it was time for me to protect my own financial future and not start plowing more and more money into what was a reasonably successful business. Getting ready to retire and part company with my business and my employees, who are almost family, was a very difficult and very emotional time. Coupled with problems that we had in the business, mainly to do with EU regulations, and I know that's a glib sort of thing to say, but we did have problems, and that affected our company and made us feel really quite vulnerable. Additionally, we had several experiences of losing important contracts to what I would call pan-European companies which had grown throughout Europe, and it just made me feel at the time that the EU had little or no real protection for smaller businesses. To an extent, I still believe that. Plus, and don't underestimate how important this is, because I think it applies to a lot of leavers, I wanted to give Cameron a kick up the arse. Actually, I put backside when I wrote this out, but I just feel so strongly. So, what with the clever marketing strategies developed by Cummings, Johnson and Gove, you may have noticed the same things are going on at the moment. All the various strategies that we see employed nowadays seem to answer some of my business concerns at the time. I was assured by comments such as, there will continue to be free trade and access to the single market. That's a quote by a chap that you may have heard of. His name's Boris Johnson. Yeah, I'll read that again. There will continue to be free trade and access to the single market. How times have changed. There's another quote that I wrote down here. Daniel Hannam, a Tory MEP. Absolutely no one is talking about threatening our place in the single market. Well, you know, that could be taken to be almost a lie, couldn't it? But it wasn't simply business and trade I was considering when I decided how to vote. I wanted to see more investment in the NHS. And I was taken in, I freely admit, I was taken in by some of the promises. Maybe not what was written down the side of a bus, but certainly a lot of the things that were said. I've got medics in my family, so I know the difficulties which in the NHS they've been facing. And the promises also included no changes to our security arrangements, no changes to our scientific partnerships, and no changes to the cultural links. I've got musicians in the family who even now are really, really worried, particularly now, worried about how they're going to be able to perform overseas and have colleagues from overseas coming here. Really, really important stuff. And on top of that, living in Dorset as I do, I was concerned, or I was being told, that it was going to be wonderful for the agricultural industry and the fishing industries. I do want to stress one thing, which is I did not believe in any way at all on anything to change freedom of movement, nor indeed to change any of our immigration rules, other than improve them. And that had absolutely no bearing on the way I vote. I was in Pizza Express last night, served by an absolutely delightful Polish girl. We had a very long chat. When I'm at Kingston Lacey, the National Trust House, we regularly get European visitors. I regularly have to apologise for our government. So, in no way was the concept of a hard Brexit or a no-deal Brexit ever crossed my mind, because it was never mentioned. That wasn't what we were being offered. We were being offered a nice close link, but we were going to get away from some of the other stuff. So there we are. Why did I change my view? The day I posted my postal vote, I was going away on holiday on the day of the actual vote. I just started to think, I wonder if I'm doing the right thing. I've already mentioned that I've been a member of the Liberal Party one way or another since 54 years ago. So you can understand why I was sort of thinking, I wonder if I'm betraying those things that I actually have fought for all my life. But the Remain campaign had been very weak. Cameron Osborne had been smug and overconfident. Leave had been very, very clever. I told myself I was doing the right thing in my own situation personally. At 3 o'clock in the morning of the result, I crept down to the living room of my sister and brother-in-law's house in Portugal. I turned on my tablet, and frankly, I was almost physically sick, because I really only wanted to give Cameron a kick up the backside. I wasn't sure if I was doing the right thing, and that's when it hit me, that we'd made the most terrible mistake. And I had made the most terrible mistake. And lots of people have said to me, oh, you're terribly brave to turn around now. I don't think it's bravery. I think it's actually just saying how it is. I don't consider that now saying I made a terrible mistake being brave. I think it's something which a lot of people actually feel. I just happen to be the loudmouth who stands up and says it. It soon became clear to me that there were a number of facts that the Leave campaign had stated which we now know were complete lies. Most especially the money available for the NHS and the status of the Irish border, which Theresa Villiers had stated, and it's her double negative, no less likely to be less open after Brexit than it is today. That's what she said. Well, I don't know what she'd say making of that now, but there we are. So gradually the Leave supporters moved away from the concept of a friendly separation, and trade and legal and security and scientific agreements maintained towards a much harder Brexit, not what had been suggested. Evidence now clearly shows that the agricultural industry could be decimated by a hard Brexit, and that will affect a lot of people, a lot of friends of mine in the agricultural industry in Dorset. Whether or not that's true of fishing, I don't know. Manufacturing jobs, financial jobs have already been lost, despite Lord Digby Jones' original assertion that not a single job would be lost because of Brexit. Well, we've all seen what's happening. So the emergence of the ERG and the Brexit Party demanding a no-deal Brexit is clearly horrifying. I'm sure you'll all agree with that. This isn't simply regaining our sovereignty, but divorcing ourselves from the international community in an act of extraordinary self-sacrifice. The people most at risk are the people most vulnerable in our society. And it's our job to protect those people. I'm a father and a grandparent. I've got a 1-year-old grandson and another grandchild on its way, and I now fear for the future of my family. To take away the opportunities afforded by membership of the EU to future generations is a penalty of which my generation should be very ashamed. To make up for this mistake that I made back in June 2016, I determined to join the Remainers who wanted to have a people's vote to establish a result when the lies of both sides were discounted and when we knew exactly what the arrangements would be in whatever withdrawal agreement was lined up. I've written many times and met several times my local MP. He was a Remainer to start with, then he became a Theresa May fan, voting for her withdrawal agreement, and now, although there was rumours he was going to join the 21, now he's voting for Johnson. So he's gone exactly the opposite direction to me. I've tweeted regularly. For an old bloke, I've managed to get a couple of thousand followers on Twitter. I've marched in London. I marched in London at every single march, and on the last one, my 1-year-old grandson had a large poster on his pram saying, "My grandson's first words were bollocks to Brexit." So much has happened since the referendum, and I totally support Joe Swinson's demand that we revoke Article 50 and remain in the EU. It's not without many of the defects that I originally was concerned about, and I believe to fight to improve it within is the only way that we will ever get the whole matter right. I believe we owe it to my children, to their children, and to all the future generations of this once wonderful country. I ask anybody who's here tonight, any of you who voted Leave but now have got doubts, to join me and all of those proud enough to support RemainerNow and fight to remain for the future of all of our children. Thank you.
Thank you, that was fantastic. Okay, so we've got Naomi, CEO of Best Britain, who's going to talk about what they're doing and how they want to work with the RemainerNow campaign to help amplify voices.
Hi everybody, and it's thrilling to be here. I often tell the RemainerNow guys that I think their voices are the most important in this debate. So I'm Naomi, I run Best for Britain, which is an anti-Brexit campaign, and our mission is to stop Brexit by any democratic means. So whether that's through the Lib Dems winning a majority in the general election and revoking, or whether through another referendum. We back all and any democratic means to stop Brexit. And I think what defines Best for Britain in terms of being one of the many campaigns that are trying to stop Brexit is that we're very, very, very data-led. And we do an enormous amount of polling, and we spend a lot of money on it. And it's not just polling, we do something called MRP, which is multi-level regression and post-stratification analysis, and that's why you now know that I'll always refer to it as MRP, because that's a tongue twister. But it's an algorithm. And what it does is it takes a large poll, and some of our polls are based on sample sizes of sort of 40,000, so huge. The average YouGov poll might be about 2,000, to give you a bit of context. And then we add in a lot of other data. And we'll add in data from the census, and from British election studies, and from the ONS. And from that we can build an algorithm that's got about 90,000 rows of data in it. And it can tell you not only how likely somebody is to be pro-Leave or pro-Remain in a constituency, but the stratification then tells you and how many people who look or sound like them live within the boundary of that ward or constituency or region. So we've been doing this now for a few years. We've done it on Westminster voting intention, which is very interesting for those of us that are concerned about a general election, and is why we're promoting a Remain alliance so heavily. But we've been doing reports that we call Brexit Shift. I also have to say that very, very carefully. And that tells us now that there is a majority in favour of Remain in the country. That there are now 422 constituencies out of 650 that are now majority Remain. We've seen this shift from Leave to Remain. Of course, Scotland and Northern Ireland always were. Wales was largely, I think there's only one constituency left now according to our data that is still slightly pro-Leave, but even the Leave, every Leave seat has shifted further towards Remain. And a couple of the pro-Remain seats are now ever so slightly less Remain because they are Conservative held seats, and the Conservative vote there will tend to do what the current Conservative leader of the day tells them to do. So in 2016 they voted Remain and now a Leave. But the country has moved on. The country is now a pro-Remain country. And what I absolutely love about RemainerNow is that they give the voice and the face to that data, because I'm there pushing out the numbers, but it's incredibly easily dismissed. But it's incredibly difficult to dismiss it when you've got brilliant people like the people that RemainerNow put up saying, no, I am one of those people. I am genuinely one of those people that has changed their mind, and here's why. And that's important, because we lost in 2016 in no small part because we didn't tell stories. And because we focused on the data, because we put big numbers out that people couldn't relate to. A lot of the work that we do with data, we also focus group and we test it. We try to test it to destruction. And we know that big numbers don't work, but small numbers do. And a lot of the people that we're trying to persuade, a lot of the people that feel most left behind and most disenfranchised and wanted to give David Cameron a kick up the arse, are the sorts of people that, if you say to them, oh, if we leave the EU, the average household will be X thousands of pounds worse off, doesn't resonate with them. If you put that into weeks, if you say every week this household will on average be, they then know that that's the difference between them being able to buy a chicken for Sunday lunch or not, that they can then eke out for a few meals during the week, because these are people who know the price of everything. They're savvy shoppers. And as a Remain campaign, we were far too elitist and removed from trying to understand the very real struggle that a lot of households were facing, and in no small part why we got to leave it. So incredibly important, I think, for RemainerNow voices to be adding the narrative to the data that campaigns like ours put out, and I think they are fantastic voices, and we're incredibly proud at Best for Britain to work closely with them and want to work even more closely with them in the coming weeks and months. The other part of our work, when we focus group, we don't just test the message, we also test the messenger. And I'm very sorry to say, Martin, that politicians are about worse messengers. Nobody likes them, nobody wants to hear what they've got to say. But celebrities are pretty dreadful as well. So we did some focus groups with income group CDE, in the north of England, predominantly white attendees, and they were people who had voted Leave, and they were people who had voted Labour. So sort of our Labour Leave focus group. And they reacted incredibly badly to David Beckham's intervention in 2016. That was one that they could remember and they cited as being awful. And that surprised me, because I thought, maybe football is something that can help us, footballers, not a bit of it. Their reactions were, I bet David Beckham has never struggled to get his kid into the local school. I bet, who is David Beckham to tell me how to vote? I bet his mum's never had to wait 6 weeks to get an appointment to check out the things she was worried about, medically. So we know that celebrities and politicians are poor deliverers of message, but that people who look and sound like you are very, very good messengers. And as and when we have another election, whether that's a general election or a referendum, we are going to need persuasive voices to reach out to those that we can bring over to our way of thinking. At Best of Britain, we have to, spend our scarce resources, both time, energy and financial, as efficiently as possible. And that does mean saying there are a segment of society we are never going to convince. I'm never going to convince Mark Francois to change his mind about Brexit. There are people who are not left behind, who are not disenfranchised, and maybe for odd reasons and notions of nostalgia, who like to think of days gone by as the good old days, conveniently forgetting that we also had polio. As a time, I'm never going to convince them. As a campaign, we're never going to convince them. So we have to go after the persuadable people, and that we can still bring over. And what we know is that voices like those who remain now up and down the country in those sorts of areas where any kind of Brexit is going to hurt them first and worst. That if we're going to bring them over, it's never going to be politicians proselytising on high to them. It's never going to be, bless them, Gary Lineker telling them that they're doing the wrong thing by voting for pro-Brexit parties or for Brexit itself. It's going to be utilising the voices of those who understand those voters, who understand why they're tempted to vote the way they're tempted, to say, I too was tempted, and here's why I am no longer. So I want to let 1,000 flowers bloom. I'm a Liberal, I am a Lib Dem as well as running Best of Britain as a cross-party campaign, and I believe in decentralisation, and I do not think that we should have any kind of authoritarian, centralised Remain campaign dictating to the grassroots groups up and down the country how they should be run, the messages they should deliver, because what on earth is the point of having grassroots groups around the country if they're not the ones to tell the central campaign, here's what works in my area, here's what the communities that we need to talk to and convince on the issue of Brexit, here's the messages that resonate with them, here are the things that they are concerned about. And I think that RemainerNow are an absolutely crucial voice in all of that, and I'm sorry I know everyone has said that, and you've been listening to tons of us say this throughout the evening, but I can't stress enough that for a national campaign like Best of Britain, how vital using RemainerNow voices is going to be in the weeks, months, and maybe even years to come as we carry on fighting this. So, thank you all for being here, and do, carry on supporting RemainerNow, as Best of Britain absolutely will.
Thank you very much. Andrew voted Leave, he's from Bristol, but he's here to tell you why he's changed his mind, and he's a Remainer now.
Guys, it's a real pleasure to be here, and thank you very much for such a warm welcome. 3 years ago I voted Leave. The reason was fairly straightforward. In my mind at that time, I felt that even though the European Commission was able to initiate legislation, I didn't have the opportunity to vote in the European Commission. Prior to the actual vote itself, funnily enough, I'd taken part in a school mock vote on the question of whether we should stay or leave the European Union, maybe three weeks prior to the actual referendum itself. And on that occasion, I voted Remain. When it actually came to the sitting in the polling booth and putting my cross next to the selection, I was actually in that polling booth for about 15 minutes wrestling with my conscience, because on the one hand I thought, well, yes, we don't really need any upheaval, but on the other hand, there's that sort of, in my mind, that question of the European Commission. I can't vote for them. Anyway, long story short, I voted leave, went to bed. The next morning, I thought, oh my God, I can't believe what's happened. It's the actual the leave campaign have actually won. And I thought, well, okay, well let's see how this goes. The politicians have been quite clear. It's been touched on earlier this evening by Julian, saying all the various promises about remaining in the Europe, not the European Union, the common market, single market. Thank you. Nigel Farage himself been talking about Norway as an example, and I thought, well, British politicians, whatever you think about them, surely they've got the best interests of the country at heart. That's what I thought. I thought, well, they're going to be sensible about this. There's going to be maybe a Norway option. There'll be a sort of Brexit light, and that, in actual fact, that's what I thought was going to happen. Maybe some sort of EFTA, British version of EFTA. Anyway, as time has gone by, as we all know, that has definitely not been the case. And what made it particularly difficult for myself is that I have a French wife. How shocking is that? So life at home was, to her great credit, she never said a cross word about it. But I did feel that at the very least, I owed her and my children to actually get out there and sort of maybe make public the fact that I voted leave, but actually, on reflection, it's the wrong thing to do, and I'm very definitely a Remainer now, and I'm more in favour of the European Union than I've ever been in my life. In fact, if we went to sort of adopt the euro and so on, we became more integrated in the European Union, I'd be very happy with that. So there you are. You have this huge sort of reversal, and I think when I came to that realisation, I thought, well, I can't be the only person that thinks like this. And thanks to Andy and RemainerNow, I was able to sort of join a group of similarly unhappy people, I guess, who'd voted that way, and we could sort of thought, maybe we could, as other people have said, amplify the fact that we have changed our minds, and we cannot be alone as this. And I think, as you said, your data has shown that more people are in fact Remain than they are Leave, and it's particularly irksome when I hear this figure of 17.4 million voting for Leave. Okay, I was one of those 17.4 million, but I ain't now, and this is a key fact that I think certain politicians are ignoring. I'm just going to wrap up by saying, never in my wildest dreams did I expect that we'd be looking at crashing out of the European Union without a deal. As I said at the very start, I thought our politicians were pragmatic people who had the best interest of the country at heart. That's certainly the case for lots of them, but I think that there are far too many of them for whom that is not the case. And that is why I'm here now, because you can sit on your backside and maybe just think, oh dear, that's a shame, what a pity, never mind. But actually, I owe it to a lot of people to show that I've changed my mind, and hopefully some good will come of this. Thank you for listening. I'm going to hand you back to Andy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Like I said, I know people have got to go, so Martin, I know you're going to be on the Q&A, but I don't want to not have a chance to let you speak. So Martin Horwood, Lib Dem MEP for the South West. I'd love to hear your views on the campaign and things we're doing, and that would be fantastic. I know you do head off at 7 o'clock. So.
Thanks a lot. I won't talk for very long actually, because I think you've been waiting a long time for the Q&A and the panel discussion. Is that on? Is that on? Yeah, that's fine. Sorry, I'm just saying I won't talk for very long because you've had a lot of politicians speaking. We've now heard categorically that people don't trust politicians, so shut up. I just want to tell you just a brief story, and I was at a meeting of the sort of liberal grouping in the whole European Parliament from across Europe in Bucharest only about a week ago, and there was quite good representation from Eastern Europe. And I tell you, if one person from Eastern Europe came up to me and said this to me, it must have been half a dozen people, saying, you know, we've been worried about the rule of law in our own countries, young democracies. We've been worried about, you know, how resilient our democracy is. And throughout all of that, we always looked up to Britain. We looked up to Britain because you represented stable, solid democracy with really firm foundations. You were the icon almost that we were aspiring to emulate. And we can't believe what's happened to you. And it, you know, actually, just even now, actually saying that, it just got me at quite an emotional level, because that was more powerful than any bit of, you know, data and opinion polling and everything else, because it was just from the heart, and it was, I felt just awful to be from this kind of nightmare sort of scenario that's developed in this country, and to be hearing this from people who looked up to us so much as a country. And it is, I think, what's been said about the value of RemainerNow is that it makes those emotional connections. You know, we, in the referendum campaign, and we can all with hindsight say we made, you know, you think you made a mistake perhaps voting Leave, guys, but we made mistakes in the campaign we were running. And in a way, that's the bigger mistake, I think, that we put these cold economic arguments when we should have been talking about Europe of peace. We should have been talking about Europe as the place where our children's future lay. We should have been talking about Europe as you know, one of the places where we can help to save our planet by working together. You know, it's on those kind of levels that we should have been talking about why people had to vote to remain, and we didn't make that emotional connection. We made that mistake. So I'm glad that we have RemainerNow to help us to tell a more emotionally connected story now, and to maybe help to put that mistake right, and I'd like to be part of that. So I won't say anything more than that, but let's get on with the Q&A on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Martin. Greatly appreciated. So, Andrew voted Leave. He's from London, but he's here to tell you why he's changed his mind and why he's a Remainer now.
Thank you. Yes, I voted to leave, and I'll tell you briefly why I did so and why I've changed my mind.
So the main reason I voted to leave was that I felt that because we were not members of the Euro, there was a sort of inbuilt conflict of interest between us and the other Eurozone members of the EU. And this would mean we would be outvoted on occasions when our interests did diverge and when we didn't have a veto. That was my main reason. So I felt that a slightly looser relationship between us and the EU than our existing terms of membership would be better, more advantageous, actually for both of us, because we would stop being a drag on those who wanted closer integration, and we wouldn't face being outvoted when it was against our interests. So you'll gather from that that I had no concept at all of a hard Brexit or clean break, as Mr. Farage puts it. I do now think that in my own mind I exaggerated that risk, and that even with a deal like Mrs. May's deal, we're actually in a worse position than we now are as full members, because at least as full members, when these questions come up, we have a voice, we have a vote, and we have a veto. But when we leave under Mrs. May's deal, or if we left under Mrs. May's deal, we'd still be subject to all those regulations, but we would have far less influence in shaping them. And so I now think that my concept of a kind of a two-speed Europe is actually fundamentally flawed. Part of my thinking was I was persuaded that we would easily reach agreement on a deal which preserved for us the main benefits of membership but left us free to do our own trade deals around the world. Well, thank you for that, Michael Gove, but I now believe that was moonshine. Like Julian, immigration played no part in my decision to vote leave. And this is why I find it so maddening when people say, oh, the one thing that the vote leave meant, everybody who voted leave wanted to control immigration. It's just not true, and it is so maddening to hear people claiming to know why we who voted leave did vote leave. I changed my mind. It was a gradual process. I actually felt very happy in the immediate aftermath of the referendum result. I remember very soon after that taking a plane, and there was an airline stewardess from Northern Ireland who was in bits about the vote. She was very worried. And I remember taking quite a lot of time to tell her, don't worry, it's all going to be absolutely fine. We've got responsible politicians. I also, the day after the vote, a lot of my colleagues were shell-shocked. It was as if the Queen had died. You've never seen such devastated people. And I thought, well, I'll go and have lunch to them and inject a bit of good cheer into the conversation. And during the course of this, I said to one of them, Michael, don't worry. Look, the government isn't stupid. They're going to work out what they want by way of a deal. They're going to get it all clear. Then they'll call a general election and get a mandate for it, and we won't trigger Article 50 till any of that has happened. How wrong can you be? So, as someone who voted leave, I do feel responsible for the mess we now find ourselves in. And I thought a lot about why it went so badly wrong. And I think the core of it is that what was set up was an advisory referendum. But that has been allowed to be treated as a binding referendum. And important things flow from it being set up as an advisory referendum. In particular, that was the basis on which the government itself explicitly rejected calls for protections such as a supermajority, so that the referendum shouldn't take effect unless, for example, at least 50% of the electorate voted to leave. The government brushed that aside, saying it's only going to be an advisory referendum. But then, dear Mr. Cameron, during the course of the campaign, makes this ridiculous comment: this is your decision, the government will implement what you decide. He had no constitutional authority to say such a thing. It wasn't the legal position, but this has fueled the leavers after the vote seizing on this and claiming that it would be a betrayal of democracy not to, quote, honour the result. This, by the way, is complete hypocrisy, because Mr. Farage himself said before the election that if Remain won by 52 to 48, he would not accept that result, and he would campaign for another referendum. But he now claims it's effectively treason not simply blindly to implement the referendum result. And then we have Mrs. May, who, contrary to all my expectation, triggers Article 50 without actually the remotest idea of what achievable plan would be in our national interest. And I believe this was nothing less than a reckless failure to safeguard the national interest. And then we have had revisionism, where what begins with Mrs. May's Brexit means Brexit. Why did she say Brexit means Brexit? Because she didn't have a clue what Brexit was. And she then decided to put her own spin on what Brexit was, and she, basing, as I now see herself, on her anti-immigrant agenda, announced that the vote to leave was a vote to end freedom of movement. And this, in turn, led to the red lines that she laid down, which have so bedeviled the negotiations, and which have finally morphed into the hard Brexit narrative that the referendum result meant leaving, deal or no deal, or as Mr. Johnson nicely puts it, leave by 31st October, do or die. I mean, what kind of a national policy is that? And now we have the chaos of the Prime Minister claiming with the support of Mr. Farage and his supporters in the ERG that Parliament's action in legislating to prevent a no-deal Brexit is a betrayal of democracy, and himself, as our Prime Minister, threatening to break the law and ignore the law that Parliament has so recently and bravely passed. Well, ladies and gentlemen, as a Leave voter, I believe it is time, it is long past time, to reject the false notion that this narrow referendum result, based on an absurdly loosely worded question, should override the true national interest. And it's time to demand that our leaders stand up for the national interest and ask themselves this vital question: is there any form of achievable relationship with the EU? And if so, what is it? Let me put that again. Is there any form of relationship with the EU which is better for the UK than the current terms of membership? And if you cannot give a coherent answer to that question, revoke Article 50. Now, I believe that we in RemainerNow are the tip of the iceberg. This is what all the polling evidence now tells us. It's not just people like us changing our minds, it's also the young people who were ineligible to vote in 2016, who are now eligible to vote, and the great majority of whom would vote to remain. Their voice matters profoundly. Now, in my view, the main fault for the mess that we are now in lies with the Conservative Party for setting the referendum up in such a cat-handed fashion, for allowing it to be hijacked, for allowing this mission creep as to what Brexit is all about. I speak as somebody for almost all his adult life who has voted Conservative. But I cannot live now with the Conservative Party. The Conservative Party, with its hardline, intolerant attitudes, is not the party I joined. That's why, about a year ago, I resigned from the Conservative Party, why I joined the Liberal Democrats, which I see as the only mainstream party with honourable allies in the Greens, and Plaid Cymru and the SNP, which has a clear and principled policy on Europe. Thank you, Andy, for allowing us in RemainerNow to have a voice. Thank you for coming to listen to us, and let us hope for a happy outcome to this sorry affair.
Thank you. Tom Brake, Lib Dem Brexit spokesman, has come by. Tom, we'd love to hear your view. Obviously, we've been hearing from people who voted Leave and have changed their minds. So we wanted to hear from you about what they should be doing, how they can help influence, and how you think a campaign like us can do more and work with anti-Brexit MPs like yourself. It'd be lovely to hear from you. Thank you, Tom.
Well, first of all, thank you very much. Thank you for being at our conference, and I'll just pick up this mobile phone before I step on it, which probably won't do it any good. And really say, I guess the Remainers now are possibly even braver than those of us who were Remainers from the start, because I suspect that when you express your RemainerNow views online, the level of attack and criticism may be even greater than people like me who've been remaining since the beginning. Now, if we get into a referendum, then I think what Remainers now need to do, and in fact all of us need to do, is up our game, particularly on social media, in terms of how we're going to respond. I had an interesting meeting with Nick Clegg a couple of days ago where he said the main issue during the referendum campaign wasn't that the Russians were interfering with Facebook and trying to skew the result of our election. The main problem was that the alt-right and people like Nigel Farage and UKIP were much better on social media than we were. They weren't necessarily breaking the law, they were just much better at it than we were. So we need to make sure that, and particularly the messages from people who previously voted Leave and have switched, then they're going to play a key role in trying to counter that quite aggressive campaign they'll be running. I think that is a key role that you have to play. I'm very pleased that you have come over to our side, and I think the experience and often the reasons that you voted Leave in the first place are the reasons that you need to help us to address. So thank you. I look forward to the campaign we're going to be doing collectively if we get into that referendum, or possibly other campaigns, because one of the things that we are now preparing for is the eventuality that Boris Johnson might actually try to secure another prorogation with a view to getting us past the 31st of October and crashing us out. So that's the next thing to watch, and I hope that all of us collectively will be on that straight away to try to kill that prospect. So thank you very much.
Has anyone got a question for Tom that they want to ask about anything that he's talked about? Yeah, stay at the front.
I think one of the big mistakes of the first referendum was migration issues was only left on the Leave side. Remain side didn't want to talk about immigration, they didn't want to talk about the benefits of immigration, and they didn't want to talk about what EU citizens are bringing to the UK. And that's why the immigration propaganda was so powerful, because it was not countered back. So if we want to win back the message and to reach emotions, we have to start talking about all the benefits immigration leave, because even the government reports say there's no effect on housing price, NHS, EU citizens are contributing beneficially to the UK, and we are making the UK a better place.
Say that actually fairly consistently the Liberal Democrats have spoken up the merits of immigration and made it clear that we see huge benefits in the United Kingdom of immigrants, whether they're from the European Union or frankly from elsewhere. So we did make that case. Interestingly, at an event that I was speaking at earlier, one of the other speakers said that in contrast, apparently Tony Blair, when he was Prime Minister, did not make a single pro-European speech when he was in, I think, England and Wales. He did make pro-European speeches in Brussels, and I think in Luxembourg and in France, but not a single one in, I think it was England and Wales. He might have made one in Scotland. But so I think that is, frankly, an indictment of our politicians, senior politicians who should have been out there speaking up the advantages of our membership of the European Union. I think we did it, but I think probably Martin, like me, will be aware that even we, to some extent, were not quite as open. I mean, we never dissed the European Union. But in a succession of European election campaigns, we would often talk about the good policies that we had in relation to health, education, law and order, and then we would try to sort of introduce a tangential link into the European Union whilst focusing on national policy. So, as I said, although we were never negative about the European Union, even we held back. And I think the experience from European elections, and I hope the experience from adopting a revoke policy, is that actually when you go out and tell people very bluntly, without equivocating, this is our policy, you attract more support, and to some extent you at least attract respect from the other side. And I've often had this in interviews with UKIP and Brexit Party people who will say on air, well, at least we know where you stand, and we wish we could say that about the other parties. And I'm afraid at that point I'm going to have to go.
No.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for coming by. I know you're incredibly busy. Martin also has to head off. So if anyone from the floor has a question for Martin.
In your view, the policy that's been passed today, in the unlikely event that there isn't a Liberal Democrat majority government, does it strengthen or weaken the argument for a people's vote versus if we were just saying people's vote?
I don't think it necessarily weakens it. I mean, I think one of the things that we need to keep saying is that the policy that was passed today isn't against a people's vote. It's just offering a bit of a shortcut. And I think the point is, you can say that there was a democratic, and this may be a controversial statement here, but there was a democratic vote for Brexit, undefined, and having all sorts of problems, but there was a vote. So it's best to have a democratic vote by the people to reverse that, to change our minds. And you can do that in a people's vote by voting Remain. But you can also do it if the general election is the first thing that comes along by voting Liberal Democrat. We will take that as a mandate to revoke. And so that's an equally democratic vote. So I think they're alternatives. It's not either or, it's not an absolute, it's not a rejection of a people's vote. And we wouldn't want to undermine people who are still calling for a people's vote in that way. We're just offering a quicker, faster, clearer alternative that also gets you a really good quality government.
Yes, thank you, Mr.
I'd like to ask a question about, in my area, I live in South Dorset, the Lib Dems are probably not going to do very well, even if my head tells me that. I'm more likely, if they have a Labour candidate who is a Remainer, a strong Remainer, I am more likely to be successful voting for her or him than I am voting Lib Dem in my area. And I'm worried that a lot of the Remain vote's going to be divided if parties don't work together better.
I think there's a very strong argument for parties working together, and I'm very pleased that Molly Scott-Cato was here earlier and that we're very clearly lined up with other Remain supporting parties, and that we are clearly opposed to the very pro-Brexit parties, the Conservative Party, the Brexit Party, still UKIP floating around. The difficulty, and this is probably not the official RemainerNow line, but it's certainly my line as a Liberal Democrat MEP, as your Liberal Democrat MEP, is that it has, over the last couple of years, been very difficult to tell what the Labour Party corporately was actually in favour of and what it was against, and trying to ride both sides of the argument has not worked for them. It is clear the party policy has shifted, and they do seem to be, up to a point, lined up with the Remain side now. But I think you have to make a judgment call locally on whether you really think that if it came to some change, another change of tack and a whipped vote, you could trust that Labour candidate to stick to the Remain line and a strong Remain line. Personally, I think the safest option might be to vote Lib Dem.
But it might be wasted in my area. I don't
know. South Dorset is very. South Dorset is part of our Euro constituency where we elected two Liberal Democrat MEPs with a lot more votes than the Labour Party got.
I didn't vote Labour in those elections. I didn't vote Labour because the Labour was such a mess.
Yeah.
But in a general election, I would definitely think differently. And I just think that the Remain parties must work better
South
together.
Dorset was a Conservative secret. I mean, there will be votes shift. I mean, I think the one thing to say is that politics as a whole, apart from the aberration really of the 2017 election where the two big old parties got a huge proportion of the vote again, but that was almost like a kind of last flare of the, volcano before it went fud. We are in much more fluid politics now, and I think anything is possible in the next general election. And I signed up to, well, I put my manifesto in as an MEP thinking I didn't really have a lot of chance. When I came second on the list, I thought, okay, I'll be clear and I'll tell my wife we're going to crack on with this, I'm going to consent to nomination, but don't worry, it's the classic line from council elections, isn't it? There's not much chance of you getting elected. And lo, here I am. And we stormed it, we absolutely stormed it in those European elections, and I think there is a real chance, if we're really optimistic and we're really confident, that almost nowhere is, beyond our reach now. And we're attracting MPs from all over the political, the different political parties, and we are quite capable of winning seats that looked out of reach only, a matter of weeks or months ago. So be confident and go out there and campaign.
Sorry, I've got one very quick question from me. One idea we've had is we try and crowdfund or something to get a group of RemainerNow people to go to Brussels. I think it was mentioned earlier. Just from a 30-second answer, what could you do there that could help kind of shift the message in Europe if we brought people across and things like that? What would you do?
I mean, the message we've been trying to get across as newly elected MEPs is to our fellow European MEPs, and most of all to the new incoming Commission, to not assume that Brexit is inevitable, to be prepared to grant us an extension. And I put this to Ursula von der Leyen, who's the new incoming Commission President. Even if it looks as though the British government and Parliament is completely dysfunctional and can't tell you very clearly what it wants, even in those circumstances, which now look increasingly likely, please do not sell those of us who are supporting Europe down the river. We need Europe's support as well. And I have to tell you, the response in the European Parliament to saying this kind of thing, they have been used to decades of being lectured and harangued by Nigel Farage, and they I think some of them genuinely thought that's what most British people thought. And it has been a massive and refreshing change to have a big party of Lib Dems and quite a few Greens saying completely the opposite, saying we don't want to turn our backs on Europe and we want your support. And it got, they were literally, when I did my first little speech on this that went around the internet a bit, I had people coming up from other countries and other delegations in the European Parliament wanting selfies with us. It was extraordinary. And we keep getting standing ovations in the Parliament, and the message has got through to the incoming Commission as well. And Ursula von der Leyen, when she did her speech accepting the post, clearly accepted the principle of an extension. They're still using this caveat about if a good reason is provided, but I think there is the clear message has got through that opinion is shifting in the UK, and that they mustn't preemptively let us just crash out almost by accident, because we've got a government clinging on to power despite having lost its majority and having no mandate for what it's doing. So we will try and do our part in the European Parliament, but we need the campaign and the message to get through here, and we need to bring people across and persuade people, and that's what RemainerNow is all about. It's about the right and the ability to change your mind. And I've been talking about washing machines outside because of the right to change your mind with the media, and saying, if you've got the right to change your mind on something as trivial as a washing machine, surely on the future of our children and our country, you have the right to change your mind as well. And if a bloke called Nigel tells you in the pub there's a particular brand of washing machine that's really good, and two dodgy salesmen called Michael and Boris sell you the deal that it comes with free healthcare and all sorts of other goodies that you don't think sound terribly likely, and you find that after you've bought the washing machine, it starts leaking and threatens to blow up and flood the kitchen, just make sure you've got the right to change your mind written down, that's all.
Thank you, Martin. Chris voted leave. but he's here to tell you why he's a Remainer now.
Thank you very much indeed. And I'm starving. Is anyone else hungry?
There's
Well,
food smells all around.
yes, lovely, isn't it? I shall be as succinct as I possibly can. I'm not a member of Parliament, not an MEP, so I'm not going to be as good as other people. Can everyone hear me at the back? Wonderful. Okay, right, straight into it. I would like first to pay tribute to just a few people. Dorset for Europe. Yeah, a fantastic organisation, working very hard here in Dorset. Dorset is where I'm from, and it is. I can't begin to tell you how much I love Dorset. And Dorset for Europe were also the ones who donated the flag, which you would have seen outside. So thank you very much indeed for all the hard work that you do. Thank you. I also want to pay tribute very quickly to the MPs. None of them are actually in here, but the MPs who did actually risk their careers in the Houses of Parliament to fight for the country, which I noticed my local MP Simon Hall did not do. And I pay tribute to my friend and hopefully right honourable friend in the next general election, David Chadwick, who was here to listen to some of our stories here. And good luck in the next general election. And of course I pay very quick tribute to Andy, to Victoria, and to my good friend Dan, who you spoke earlier, who you heard speak earlier on very passionately about why he voted to leave and why he changed his mind. I'm going to get through this really, really quickly, but it is important that I tell you why I voted to leave and why I changed my mind. The main reason for me voting to leave was the NHS. The NHS is, without a doubt, the beating heart of our country. And there are very few things that we are more proud of as Brits than our NHS. So to get the chance to help the NHS, that it's struggled so badly in the past few years, by lending my vote to the Leave side to inject £350 million a week into the NHS was something that I was willing to do. So I did. And side with that is the immigration. I know some other guys have said that immigration had nothing to do with their vote. Unfortunately, it had something to do with mine. Because I saw a poster which said that we were being overrun, which pays tribute to the NHS argument as well, because I don't want the NHS to struggle. So that's what I was told. As a constituent, I believed what the MPs were telling me. So, but I will mention, very quickly, no one mentioned the Irish border during the referendum campaign. No one said anything about no deal. Nobody. And nobody said anything about leaving the single market. So that's very brief, why I voted to leave. Why I changed my mind. Again, very briefly. Has anyone not heard of a man called James O'Brien? You haven't? That's fine. He is an LBC presenter. He's on between 10 and 1. Yeah, so you can listen to it. And I started listening to him because I fell across him just completely by mistake. Whilst on holiday, started listening to him on the radio. And he started to dismantle everything that I once believed about why it was a good idea to leave the European Union. And it was just from there. It snowballed into this situation where I thought, what the hell have I done? So, what have we at RemainerNow done since? We've done, you've heard, quite a bit. We are very, very active on Twitter. We've been to Parliament twice. We do videos and articles. I've done some local news, and I'm also the host of the RemainerNow podcast. And I'll speak very briefly about that, because it's a great way for you to listen to some of the other people who changed their minds on Brexit. And it's all well reading it on a piece of paper, which is fantastic, but if you listen to the podcast, it really gives you an idea about the emotional state of that person. And you're able to connect with them on an emotional level, which I think is very, very important. No two stories are ever the same, even though you might think that they might be. And one thing I did find very, very important during one of those interviews that I did with somebody for the podcast is, well, how do I make this very, very quick? When you look at European law, there's a chap on there that was actually studying law at university. I asked him, what kind of level in terms of education do you need to be at to have a real firm understanding of European legislation? He said A level. So we were asked to vote in a referendum and make decisions based on European law, when I can quite confidently say most of the people in this room don't have an A level in law. Okay? So I found that very, very eye-opening. But I mentioned, of course, the bravery of some of these people who have come onto a podcast or have come to speeches to tell their story, and we owe you all tribute for doing that. And it does take bravery because of the kind of venom that could be spat at you from over Twitter or Facebook or others. So we do need to be careful about attitude, because these people are very, very brave and they are coming out to tell their stories, and as Remainers, you need to give these guys a chance to be able to explain themselves. I have heard and seen on some occasions where Remainers have said, I don't care, it's your fault. That's disgusting. And that's the kind of attitude that none of us should ever be tempted to fall into. Like I said, I'm just going to wrap up now. I don't want to take up too much more of your time. I just want to leave you with 3 little points here, just to think about. To me, and I say this quite often, that the day after the referendum there were 17.4 million different versions of Brexit. That does not have a mandate. And because of that, Boris Johnson does not have the right, nor the mandate, to pursue a no deal. And the last thing I would say is, I'm sorry. Allow me to say from the bottom of my heart, because the last few years has been some of the toughest of my life, being able to look genuine Remainers in the eye and tell you why I did what I did, and to say to you, I am genuinely sorry for putting you in this position. And God willing, you'll find it in your hearts to forgive me one day. And if anyone has listened to my podcast, you'll know I say the same thing at the end of every podcast. So I shall say it to you now. Please remember, always, that it is okay to change your mind. Thank you for your attention this evening.
And our final speaker is Tim, who is co-chair of Dorset for Europe. He's going to give a little insight into what they're doing on the streets and how they're working with the RemainerNow campaign.
Okay, thanks. Thanks very much. Yeah, working. Okay, good. So, my name's Tim Joyce. I'm from Dorset for Europe. We are a cross-party campaigning group, much like RemainerNow, but we campaign locally in Dorset to change people's minds on Europe. So, Bournemouth. Welcome to Bournemouth. It's Bournemouth voted 55% to leave. But, and I'll be really, Naomi spoke earlier, I'll be really interested in her numbers. We now believe we've switched that around and we are now 55% Remain. So Bournemouth is RemainerNow. So we're part of a network of 4 Europe groups. There are probably 250 or so around the country, each of which is taking a personalised, localised message to their communities. And it's why I get slightly frustrated with politicians going, oh, we should be campaigning on this message or this message. No, we campaign on very, very local messages. And so what we do, and this is why I can't name the number of groups, is we spawn local groups into local communities. So we've had New Forest for Europe in the audience, and they've taken the message locally in the New Forest. We've had Southampton for Europe, Southbourne for Europe, which is Southbourne, if you don't know, it's about 5 miles to the east of here. So, changing that 55 leave to 55 remain, that's tens of thousands of people have changed their mind across Dorset and become RemainerNows, right? And those journeys are really, really different and personal and varied, and we've heard a lot of those stories today, which are personal journeys, and people we talk to on the streets are each on their own personal journey from leave to remain. And I just want to remind people, you may not talk to someone and they have a road to Damascus style conversion in that conversation. It may take many, many conversations for them to make that journey from leave to remain. And so, whilst you're campaigning, whilst you're taking those personal messages out there, just remember that you're part of a chain of events. You're part of many, many people who will help change people's minds. So, keep those conversations going, that's my message. Find leavers wherever you can and talk to them. And that's how we win. We won't win with some huge message from above. We'll win on individual conversations, on the streets, on the doorsteps, on social media.
Thank you, everyone. That about an hour over schedule brings us to the end of our speaking portion. Thank you, everyone who stuck with us. I know it's been quite a long event. We were going to have a Q&A. If there are people that want to kind of ask some questions to the group, maybe drill down a bit more with some of the RemainerNow guys who are still here. I think a couple have had to go themselves, or of myself, or of Tim here. Please do. We can have them now. Or alternatively, we can always just nip to the bar here and have a chat, otherwise, if people want to quickly, before people let it off. So maybe we take one or two questions now, if anyone has them, and then otherwise we can just chat to people in the bar if anyone wants to hang around and have a drink. So is there anyone that, whether it's about our campaign, Dorset for Europe, chat more about some of these guys, that would be great to hear.
So I guess just a bit of advice on how to engage with people. So most people I know personally that I would talk to are Remainers or have been Remainers, people in my family. So the situation where I come across people that really different opinions are kind of people on Facebook that I know tangentially. And mostly I know that they have a different opinion because they're sharing something which often I think is factually incorrect, but I don't necessarily think that engaging with the facts of what's being said is the way forward. So I'm just interested in your opinion on how to productively engage in that situation, or if there is a way to productively engage in that situation.
I'll just say one thing and then I'll probably let the guys that really know answer the question. I would say, one thing that would be great is if maybe if they read other people that have changed their minds, that might help, right? So, some of these stories, so if you are following us on our Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, etc., maybe just sharing them. You never know with slow burn. So one example, there was a guy who was following us on Twitter, and for about 3-4 months he was debating with us and basically just coming out with some quite hardline arguments which I knew to be wrong. And for ages I was trying to kind of come back, but he was following us and he was obviously reading the stories, and then all of a sudden he contacted me kind of end of February and said, Tag the RemainerNow campaign, and goes, I've changed my mind and did a thread telling a story. And in essence he was like, you know what, I was trying to hold on to my position, I was trying to hold on to where I'd been, and then he actually called James O'Brien in March and said this to him, but he said, I tried to hold on to this position, and then I was coming back, reading back at the debates I'd had on Twitter later, and I was like, I don't believe anything I've said. I believe what they've said, and I've read the stories of others, and I'm ready to do it. So that might be one way of kind of just calmly saying that this is the position, and then maybe them reading stories of these guys, watching a video, whatever. You never know if you're sharing stuff what is making them. Because that guy Andy, I very nearly muted him because I was just he wasn't listening, and now he has done 3 videos to camera and he's written 5 articles since March. So, you never know when you're having that. Yes, as Naomi said earlier, there are hardliners you're never going to change, but there might be some people that you think they're hardliners, but they're just saying things to hold on to that position. So that would be the one bit of advice I maybe give is like you know, as Tim said a minute ago, you know, you never know how you're affecting people and different arguments work with different people. So, and then if you guys got,
Okay. I will add to that that at the end of the day, you can't reason somebody out of a position they haven't been reasoned in. That's the first thing. And what you'll find is when people are so emotionally attached to what they've got, they are not willing to let it go, not even if you're going to throw facts and figures at them, which is the problem with the referendum in the first place. The Leave was all about engaging with people's emotions. Yeah, your lives are crap, and these are the reasons why. You know, because of immigration, because of the NHS, emotional reasons that grab people's imaginations. The Remain side was all about facts and figures, which nobody wants to read. Yeah, so that's the first thing. Now, when I've spoken to fellow Leavers about changing their mind, I don't attack them. I don't, you know, have a go, and I don't even tell them why I changed my mind. I want them to try and convince me why they think and feel the way they do. So, you know, so how do you feel that way? Could you explain it to me? Because I don't understand. Give them the chance to come back at you, so that, because that's the only way you're going to do it. They need to explain it to you in order to explain it to themselves and realise that what they're trying to tell you is absolute, insert word here. So that's the only way you're able to do it, is invite them to explain themselves and let them themselves talk themselves out of their own argument. That, to me, was the best way to do it.
Either Andrew, we've got anything to add? Great.
So, I just want to echo Chris's point there, really. So, you know, convincing people is 80% listening, 20% talking. You've got to, Brexit as a topic is so multifaceted, you've really just got to listen and wait to understand why people feel the way they do, and then once you're listening, they'll engage and you can begin to change and shift minds. And that's essentially what we do on the streets, a lot of listening.
Thank you. Maybe one more, and then we're going to let people go, and you can ask questions over a drink, maybe. Anyone else? Okay. Thank you so much all for coming. Like I said, I know we've overrun, and that's a learning curve for us as an event. If you do want to help us, like, we are grassroots. There's kind of a group of 8 of us now that do it. Only one of us does it. You know, outside of a full-time job. Our campaign manager Victoria quit her job in April, having helped with the campaign for 14 months to try and give this a go, and it's purely just off crowdfund. We've got no corporate money. So look, if you do think some of these are interesting and you think one's the right thing, there's a bucket at the back, or there's also you know, you can donate on our website if you are interested. But look, no one apart from Victoria, it's basically just so she can afford rent. We do things, and there's also other campaign costs. There's things we want to do. We talked about maybe getting people to Brussels. You know, we're going to launch crowdfunders like that. That would be great if people. I know there's loads of campaigns, so I appreciate there's a limit of what people can do. But then the other big help, as I said, is just raise awareness. Like, what we would love, we've been at a stand at the Lib Dem conference last 2 days. We've got another couple more. As I said, we're doing an event in Brighton for Labour conference next week. But you know, we also want to raise awareness. We would love every single person out there who's campaigning at people's vote stalls all around the country, or even is just doing it in their friends, to know about us. So when they're having those conversations, they can refer people to our website, to our Twitter, or whatever, so they can get in contact with us in case they want to do videos, articles, what have you. And we can share their story, because you know, I think it helps others speak up. So that would be the most helpful thing that people can do. Those 2 things are, you know, fantastic. And thank you so much everyone for coming. And you know, thank you for, you know, listening to some of these incredible stories that people have given. And yeah, if anyone does want to catch up, we'll have a quick drink in the bar.
You've been great listeners. Thank you so much.